Right, I think we'll probably kick off. So this will be going on YouTube. So for anyone wanting to watch this, they'll be able to watch it from there. Thanks, Ken, for joining tonight and for all of the resources you've put together for tonight. I think it'll be really, really good for those both attending and those that get to watch it later. But yeah, Phoebe will be taking it from here. I will be in the background, making sure any questions get answered and any mics are muted if need be. And yeah, we'll crack on with it.
Okay, thanks, Sophie. I'm not sure how many people we've got online, but I saw there was only 20 registrations, so that's good. Who am I? I'm Ken Solly's my name. I'm a private consultant based in Warrnambool. I had a major mental breakdown in 2019 and I shifted from Narracourt to Warrnambool to be close to family and have their care. And yeah, I was off the scene for about 2 years and I just slowly have been invited to do this, that and the rest, and I'm now pretty much working full time again. So I say to people I've basically retired from retirement. I did a fair bit of cost of production probably nearly 15 years ago, but being in, I haven't done any of this work for quite a while, but I was asked 2 months ago to do a workshop and for a Best Wool Best Lamb group at Lismore in Western Victoria. So I went and did that. And we all either are a right brain or a left brain person, and I'm more left brain, so I sort of enjoy the figures a fair bit. And any farming decision without figures, I think, has a fair degree of risk. So I what do I do presently? I've got 4 lifetime U groups. I teach for RIST at Hamilton in business planning and nutrition. I teach the Murdoch University students, and I do a little bit at Melbourne Uni as well, and occasionally at a few other institutions, but we won't go there. Yeah. Okay, so welcome, Jane. Good. Okay, so tonight's topic being cost of production. Can anybody tell me what their cost of production is? Do you have any idea, Mark?
Yeah, I'm going to give you an idea. I think I had someone come do a bit of help with what we're doing here, and we worked out to be $4.09 per kg.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
so
for a cattle operation.
Yeah. Jane, would you know your cost of production?
I'm just starting to look at it now, but no, I don't have a definitive figure.
Okay, well, a lot of people think that driving the cost of production down is what the name of the game is. But in reality, it's how we're spending those dollars that creates the income. And what we're most interested in is the margin. We want to have the best possible margin. And the other thing is a lot of people will look at the current cost of production and take the knife to that, when in actual fact the system by which you're producing your income probably needs to come under the microscope more so than the actual figures. Sometimes when you take the knife to or cut out or reduce costs, it can have a direct impact on production and therefore will affect your margin. So Linton, can you tell me what, in a commercial sense, what's your fundamental role as a prime lamb producer, or even as a seed stock producer as you are? What's your fundamental role?
Well, we've only got a seed stock enterprise, but it's really to provide animals that are going to give the greatest return back to the producers, that understand data and know how to use it, and It's our job to actually provide the ramps to achieve the best outcome.
Right. And the way they look is dependent on genetics plus their environment. So the environment is made up of their nutrition. So if we're in a commercial sense, our fundamental role is to be a really good grass converter. Is how do you convert what grass you're growing into production? How can you be a better grass grower and then a better utiliser of that grass? Once we get that fundamental right, then we can make some inroads. Can those people be encouraged?
Yeah, g'day, Ken. Luke
All
Carr,
right.
mate. How are you?
Good.
That's
Yeah.
it, Ken. I'm a prime land producer up near Dubbo, New South Wales, and
Right.
And it's an interesting conversation, this, because regarding cost of production, I've gone through a real transition, probably in the last 10 years, from chasing production to really narrowing down to margin, what you're talking about. And so my answer to your question, Ken, is what I was putting a lot of inputs into the system, thinking that I was creating more profit, but all I was really doing was I was creating probably more revenue, but it wasn't actually contributing to the margin. And this is, with prime lamb especially, I was trying to sell export lambs, which is what our family traditionally done. And so we were putting a lot of grain and time and sharing and everything into the lambs, and it wasn't contributing to margin. And so I'm now in a benchmarking group, and we've changed the way that I'm running my system to a more of a store or sucker lamb type operation, where the lambs are gone by summer, and there's a lot less inputs into the system, and a lot simpler model, I think. So that's the path I'm on.
I thought about putting up the old law of diminishing returns curve tonight, but I think everybody's sickened by seeing it so often, but it's ever so true. So there's a lot of people who are forcing the system, and they're actually creating maximum production under that circumstance. But in reality, we make the most money at optimum production. So it's not at the top of the curve. It's as we head up. And I reckon every input that you have into your business, you've got to ask yourself, what am I getting for the last third of my input? And quite often that last third, you might not be getting, you might be getting your money back. I think that's what Luke was sort of alluding to is, so knowing where optimum is, but then being able to drill down and sort of say, well, every input has its limit or its optimum point, and it's to know which one of those inputs is actually limiting the overall production. So a lot of the time I've got a bag of favourite sayings, and one thing is timing isn't something, it is bloody everything. So when we, the timing of, the time that we put our rams out is so critical because it triggers all the other activities throughout the year. So if we haven't got the timing of our start of joining right, then it's going to not allow us to optimise as we go forward. Now, where I live, we produce about 2/3 of the pasture in 1/3 of the year. And we've had an enormously dry season down here in Western Victoria and in South Australia. And we've got to make sure that we are actually doing the right thing to get ourselves in a better position. So the answer to my question with Phoebe was there'll be a lot of people who will go and cut the fertiliser, probably knock some insurance out and do that sort of thing. That might bring your cost of production down, but the longer term effect might well be that it'll impact on your production of kilograms per hectare. So in the short term, they may well be a bit of a band-aid or a quick fix and allow you to maintain a margin. But in the long run, you might have to go back and look at your system that you're operating and change that. And time of joining is just one of those things. The other thing is with cost of production, I think, is to make sure you've got some really good trigger points in the game. So, take for instance, with condition scoring you use, condition score. If you're on top of that all the time, I always say to them, members of my groups, I say, you never take, every time you take a mob of ewes to the yards, you've got to get your hands on them. You've got to know which direction your ewes are going. And if they're going one way or the other, that becomes a trigger for you to make a better management decision going forward. Likewise, when it gets to the end of spring in this part of the world, we've got predominantly perennial pastures down here, but we're wanting 2.5 tonne of dry matter at dry off to be able to carry ourselves as far forward into the next autumn before we start supplementary feeding. So that becomes a trigger point. And if you know that you've only got 1,500 or 1,800 where you should have 2,500, that creates another trigger point for you to change your management and not just roll along, and then you find that come April or May, you've fed $15 down a ewe's throat, and then you turn around and sell it for very little. You've got to have those early triggers that can help. And I never want to ever forget the human factor too, because if things are going really tight on your farm and you are just not sleeping for 2 or 3 weeks in a row, that in itself should be a trigger for you to start to make some serious changes, because obviously you are worried about what the outcome would be. So tonight, I always believe that the journey is more important than the destination. So regardless of what cost of production we come up with tonight, I believe it's what you learn along the way and the challenge questions you place upon yourself that become really important. So what I thought I'd do is just, for people who haven't done it before, is just take you through a little case study. So Phoebe might bring up the case study file, and this, I've simplified it as much as possible. Can you do that now, Phoebe? You've got your microphone off. Oh, yeah. Okay. So go back up to the top of it.
Is this the right one?
Yeah. If you can run to the top of that. Yeah. Keep going. Is there any chance you can make it a shade bigger on your end? Yeah, that's it. Okay, so this little exercise is going to take into consideration it's a lamb, wool and cropping property, but we've just got 1,500 merino ewes mated to the Dorset with a weaning percentage of 107, 250 hectares in the 550 mil rainfall and lambing in July, and the target market is for a 20 to 22 kilogram carcass weight. Now, when you come to do cost of production, there's lots of figures that you need to get right. And if you scroll it up a bit, Phoebe, a bit more, you'll see here, these are the things that we're going to work through first and foremost. So the annual livestock schedule, a lot of, I think that this is an underrated document on any farm, not only as a planning tool, but as an accounting thing for the rest of, at the end of the period. And then looking at what enterprise output really is, as opposed to cash income. Then look at the gross margins and how gross margin for this enterprise and how it can actually help with the cost of production figures, and then calculate the total kilograms of lamb produced, and we'll work through the MLA cost of production tool, provided things go to plan. So, Phoebe, I'd like you to now go to the livestock schedule, would you please? That's actually in the worksheet, the Skipton worksheet, if you've got that there. If you bring that up on the screen. Now go down the bottom and go to stock schedule. Okay, can you actually just fill the screen up a little bit with that so that we can see it a little bit better? I think most people could read if they've got the same as what I've got in front of it anyhow. Yeah. So go, yeah, that's better. All right. So we've got our stock on hand at the start, our 1,500 ewes. There's also a lamb trading enterprise in this. We've got the 35 rams. So that's the start. We've got a value there of 160, 110, 500 average on the rams. So we can see down the bottom of our yellow column, we've got a total value of the livestock at the start of 266. Then we've got lambs born and what our purchases are of new ewes, because being a terminal enterprise, there's no replacement ewes being bred, so they're bought in, and some rams are bought in each year. So we can see our total stock expense, and then our sales of cull ewes. Then we've got some old lambs being sold. Then we've got trade lambs, 200 of them. There's going to be them sold, and some ewe and wether lambs being the first cross lamb situation. We've got our total stock income. Then we've got rations and deaths. And then we have our transfers in and transfers out to end up with we've got 1,530 ewes on hand at the end. We've got 135 trade lambs there, and we've got 37 rams. So we've got our total value at the end of the year. And the reason we do this is if we look at the cash position, there could be some cash generated during the year that's still running around out in the paddock. So we can see 266,300 at the start and 278. So there's a bit more running around there at the end. But we've got $249,000 worth of income, and we've got our stock purchases at 91. So what we want to do is work out what our enterprise output truly is. Now, when you have your tax done with your accountant, quite often you'll take your stock numbers in. The accountant will use your stock numbers, closing stock numbers for last year as the opening stock numbers for this year, and then you'll take your figures in as of the end of this year, and the accountant finds it hard to make it reconcile. So the deaths and rations column quite often is used as the reconciliation number. And I've got a good colleague by the name of John Burgess in an accountancy firm, Murray Nankerville at Bordertown, where JB Swift have a land processing plant. And John, tongue-in-cheek, says, I reckon I've killed as many sheep in my office as what they have at JBS, because the numbers just don't add up. And he's had to make it reconcile by adding more deaths or rations in there. So roll it up, Phoebe, to the next. What is the true enterprise output for this? So the enterprise output is sales minus purchases plus or minus the change of inventory for the year. So we can see that our enterprise output was 169,925 based on the livestock side of it, and the wool is an addition to the enterprise output when you need to go there. So now go to the sheep profitability matrix, if you would, Phoebe, please. Yeah, no, that's it. Right. Okay, so when we look at how we create a gross income from a sheep enterprise, we can see all the contributing factors to each segment of the production system. And when we're talking cost of production, our ability to influence a lot of those things instantly is very limited. It's something over time. A good example is genetics. If we're going to buy genetics that are going to be superior and have higher growth rates and ultimately better conversion rates, then that's going to take time. So, and there's the two things in agriculture that we cannot influence, that is the climate and the markets, are probably the two most influential factors that affect our margin. So it can be a process where you need to look at all those aspects and where are you actually positioned? Have you optimized your ability or performance in each of those areas, and trying to identify what's the reason why you haven't been able to do that in the past. Okay, if we go to the gross margin now, if you can, Phoebe, on that one, and now go down to sheep, down the bottom tab. Yeah. So when we look at, I still think that there's good value in doing both a planned gross margin, but also doing an actual one at the end of the year to reconcile the figures and get an accurate account of what actually happened in your business. Now, when we look at all the contributing factors in the short term, a lot of the time it'll be the 1 and 2 percenters in a number of different areas. If we can actually roll, say, 4 or 5 1 or 2 percenters, it could be a factor of, say, 6 or 7% improvement or saving. So if we, up the top there, we've got 21 micron wool with 1,500 ewes. With the additional stock on the farm, we've got nearly 3,000 DSCs. If you roll to the bottom of that gross margin, Phoebe, you'll see that just using the average DSC for each of the classes comes to 29.46, and the misleading part of that is that when the ewes are actually at day 20, day 30 of lambing, they're probably close to 3 DSCs. So the DSC pressure that's put on the farm, are we actually doing that at a time when we've got the cheapest form of feed in pasture available to us. So if we roll back up to the top of the gross margin again, it's interesting in that we've got a merino ewe flock mated to a Dorset, and you can see the figures there: $10 for greasy for wool, $5 for the lamb's wool, $2 for crutchings, which is probably too high, but 135 average for lambs and 110 for cull ewes. And you can see out of that, we've got what people would look at the flock and say it's a merino flock, but it's producing $86,500 worth of wool and $259 worth of meat products. So, you know, we should never lose sight of the multi-purpose capability of the merino sheep. And, you know, this season to see, you know, say a composite ewe that might weigh 85 kilos losing a single lamb, and you've spent $40 worth of wool on her, becomes a huge liability to the system. Whereas a merino ewe, if she loses a lamb, at least we're getting a fleece of wool off them. But we'll look at some other factors later on. So as we come down, roll it up a bit, Phoebe, if you would, we've got our shearing expenses there. And I've just put the total dollars out to the right-hand side and what percentage that represents of the total costs of running the enterprise. And that's grossly affected by the fact that we're buying in all the replacement ewes, which makes up 55% of the costs. Animal health, including lamb marking and NLIs, is 10 grand, or only 6%. Then we've got freight at 3.7% or 6 grand there. Then our selling charges, yard fees, levies. Now, obviously, if you are auctions plus or direct to the processor, then some of those will be avoided, but and it's a huge cost. So we've got to perhaps look at all these costs, but just to leave them embedded inside the gross margin as individuals, I think we need to group them together. And by grouping them together, it then makes it easier to load that data into the cost of production calculator. If you go further down, Phoebe, we've got $326, I think it was, $1,000 of the gross income, and total expenses are sitting at 165. Now, when we look at our three major costs, being our operating costs or enterprise costs, our overheads and our labour, it is desirable to try and spend $1 and gain 3 on operating costs. Now, in this case, we're spending 165 to get 300. So we're spending 40, just under 50% to get the 100%. So it's about 47%, I think, which in itself has inherent risks, because if the price goes down and you're still got that cost structure, it's eating away at the margin, and therefore you're exposing yourself risk-wise. You can see there that the gross income and then the gross expenses and the gross margin per hectare and the gross margin per DSC. And I think they're useful things to generate, particularly when you've got multiple enterprises on your farm. You know, in this case, it's got a cropping enterprise as well. So to be able to look at what each enterprise is doing.
Can I just interrupt you, Ken?
Yeah.
Yeah, just back on that, spending $1 to get 3. So talking about that, I've heard you say that before. I've seen on presentations, and so what you're saying is that with that cost base of $165,000, your preference would be to see a gross income there of 450 or 480,000. To be a resilient sort of business.
Yeah, and what I'm saying there too, Luke, is if you want a return on your assets, like you look at the three things you want: good cash, you want to be making good profit, and then you've got to be turning that profit into wealth. So if we're left with that gross margin for the enterprise, that gross margin then has got to service wages and service the debt, and then you've got to have money left over to be able to do, capex and educate your kids and that sort of thing. So that's where I want to see it. But if you go back through it, through the gross margin, is there inappropriate spending as you go along? Well, if you look at the shearing costs and that, well, they're set by the award, and you've got no real scope. And probably if you go back up again, Phoebe, to where the shearing costs is, you've got things like work cover, well, they're compulsory. And when you have operating costs, a lot of them take the nature of a fixed cost, because you're actually, if you're going to be in the game, take animal health, for instance, you would say, well, I must drench and vaccinate my flock every year. It's just too big of a risk not to do it. So it sort of becomes almost a fixed cost within the gross margin, even though it is called an enterprise cost. So it's when we come to things like, say, the supplementary feed down the bottom, which is quite a large sum as well. So there you might think that you've got some discretion, but I've done 11 dry time workshops, and I was seeing in lifetime ewe groups where they were just continuously underfeeding the ewes, and they were losing condition. And the only way I could get them to turn around was for me to do a budget on the cost of not feeding properly. Well, I went through on 1,000 composite ewes, and I did, the ewe deaths went from 2 to 5%, which is pretty low still in what we've had in this area. Lambing percentage was down by 10%. Wool was down by 10%. Carcass weight was down 2 kilos. And then next year's conception rate was going to be down 5% as well. And I put $125 on lambs and $6.5 on carcass. And if you worked all that out, it came out at $48,000 of loss if those reductions in production actually took place. So the idea of saying, well, we've got discretion in the feed area, when you decide not to feed, well, know what the true impact of that is. We always should be farming on the basis of high probability, not on hope. And I've seen some people this year hoping it was going to rain in the next couple of weeks, and it just didn't come. So they really have suffered. And, to get their ewes back in good, their twin most profitable ewes back into lamb, I think some of them are going to be in for a shock. Probably in this area also more so the cattle side of it. Okay, so let's go forward to our lamb sales on the same spreadsheet. That's it. So scroll down. So out of all those lamb sales that we had, or sheep sales and purchases that I had on the livestock schedule, Now it's been fleshed out into actual sales for the year and what the weight of each of the group of lambs that were sold, what the total kilograms of live weight, what the dressing percentage was, the average carcass weight, total carcass weight, dollars per kilogram carcass weight for total dollars out the other side. And I haven't got into the skin side, but there's a provision for it there. Then we end up with the average price of lambs. So we can, now we've got a figure there of 80,620 kilos of live weight lamb, or 34,708 kilograms of carcass weight lamb that we can actually feed into our cost of production calculator. We've also got our sheep sales and our purchases as well in that same grid. And I said to Sophie, like, if anybody wants these, anything they see on the screen tonight, you're most welcome to have it. They'll probably have somewhere where you can go to get hold of it. If it saves your time. Okay. All right. Here goes the big test question for me. I'm going to try and open the MLA cost of production thing my end. Can you see that? You can? Wow.
No. Now maybe try it. I think I was sharing.
Okay. So this is on the MLA website, but be careful with it. When I come to save it and then reopen it, it becomes a bit of a nightmare for me, but that may well be the capacity of my computer. So for the sake of the calculator, we've got our first tab up here is our lamb
I don't
income.
think it's quite shared yet on yours. Are you?
So we've got 3 tabs running across the top here: lamb income, trading income, and our wool income. So we've got in our lamb area, we've got at the opening point, we've got 80 lambs in the stock schedule. At the end, we've got 135. So we've got an increase of 55. I've kept them all at 35 kilos and $110. Now, when you're accounting for sheep on a property where you'd never want to be creating dollars on paper, it's got to be real money. So if the market took a jump towards the end of the year, there'd be a huge tendency to want to put a higher value at the closing value, but you still haven't sold them, and you may not get that higher price. So what I'm suggesting is from one start to finish of the year, you use the same value, but then if you want to increase it, you increase it at the start of the next year, and you go on from there. So out of these extra lambs, we had 1,925 kilograms more lamb on the property at the end of the year than what we did at the start. In other words, that could be deemed unrealised sales. And at the value of that we've put on them, that's a value of 5,050. Then I wish we could make this bigger. Our lamb's kilograms weight, there's 80,600, which we determined from that previous spreadsheet. And the total value was $231,000 of lamb sales, again from that spreadsheet. Then we had purchases of, we had we've got 7,000 kilos of lamb live weight in the trade lambs that we purchased, and they were valued at 16,000. So we've got a total weight, the 73,000 plus the nearly 2,000 there, for a total of 75,000 kilograms of live weight produced. and a lamb income of 221. So this extra dollars up here, those added to the dollars there to get a total lamb position. Now moving to the, so in our trading income, we've got 1,500 ewes here, 1,530 at the end, so we've got 30 more there. We've got a couple of more rams, and in terms of stock numbers, we've got another 32 more, and that's we've got at the end of the day our sales of sheep at 28,000, and then we've got the purchases. So one from the other means that we've got 46, and the 5,800 over here reduces that 46 down to 41,000 as our trading income. Then we move to our wool income, and wool income, now there's a little technicality in terms of wool that may be on the sheep, and in this case I've put, or if you actually still had wool in the shearing shed at the start of the year but it got sold, so that's wool from the previous year which shouldn't show up in this cost of production calculation. So I've just got a few kilos on the trade lambs that are showing up there. We've got the $86,000 that we get for our total wool sales, including crutchings. We've got 86 plus the 550. We go to $87,000 worth of wool income for this enterprise. So we've now can move to our direct expenses that are associated with running. We come down here, I've got these, most of these were lifted off the gross margin, but they may well be in your accounts, in your accounting program, but quite often you'll get costs. If you've got a multiple enterprise property, you might have all the costs bulked together and they need to be pulled out specifically for the sheep. Take fuel, for instance. That's probably one line, but you need to know what a portion it is. So just working our way down here, we've got transport and cartage at 6,000. We've got selling costs at 23,000, shearing and crutching at 15, and then we've got fodder at 22,500, and stock insurance at 1,330, other at 2,000. Then we've got the FERG factor at 5,000. So if you want to make an immediate impact on your cost of production, sack FERG. No, not really. Okay, so we've got $85,000 worth of direct expenses or enterprise costs there. Now we go to our labour and overheads. This is a challenging area for most farms because they don't actually pay themselves a full wage. So the question you could ask yourself is, if I was lying in the Royal Hospital in your state for the next 12 months, how much would you have to pay somebody to do exactly what you do? So this is an area where a lot of people will only take drawings. So they might take $4 grand a month or 48 for the year. But in reality, their salary in true terms could be double that. So we've got to make sure that when we're doing our cost of production that we're actually putting in a real figure, not a. Otherwise, when you come out, you'll have a lower cost of production, but at the end of the day, you won't have the dollars to pay yourself. So,
Ken, what is it? Where are wages at the moment, Ken? Like for an owner-operator, or have you got any benchmarks for that?
Yeah, if you're looking for, I'd like to think that that it's probably sitting at about $700,000 to $800,000 gross per family unit is where the area we'd like them to be. But obviously, if they've got no debt and they live like a drover's dog, well, they probably get by on 500. But if we're spending somewhere between 12 to 14% of our gross income on wages, then 12 to 14% of 800,000 takes us to $100,000 worth of wages in there as being a ballpark figure.
Yep.
So because this enterprise has a cropping enterprise as well, I've put 32,000 in there for the owner-operator, and just for the sake of the exercise, we have some casual stuff down the bottom there for the lamb enterprise. So our total wage here is 34,400. So we'll come back to that as a percentage of the gross income later on. So the button at the bottom right-hand corner, which you can't really see properly, is expand up, and it expands up the overheads. And I've got 5,000 of repairs and maintenance to shed yards and fences. And these sort of expenses have got to be more of annual expense rather than a one-off huge expense that are going to blow the cost of production out of the water. So to me, that 5,000 is sort of an annual expense to keep things in shape, and then repairs and maintenance to plant and equipment, 1,500. Depreciation, 6,000. Now the overall depreciation on the machinery, I have that real depreciation, not tax depreciation, sitting at around about 11% of the value of the plant and machinery. And then I've apportioned it out, and I think I've only given 6,000 to the total sheep enterprise out of a total figure of about 30,000, the rest being in the cropping enterprise. Admin at 2,000, electricity and gas 600, insurance, that's general farm pack insurance, the proportion of that is 2,200. Pasture costs, well, that could be seed, but again, you've got to be mindful that you are not doing a huge whack of pasture in 1 year and loading up the cost there. It's more of an annual cost. Rates, 25.50. Fuel and oil, the sheep side of that, 32.50. Private vehicle, 1,000. And then I put in 1,000 of other, and then fertiliser. I'll put $7,500 in there and kept that separate from other pasture costs being seed. Now you see the down the bottom left-hand corner, you've got add overhead. So if there's something there that's not there when you come to do it, well, you can add another thing. So just a matter of clicking on there, typing in what it is, and then saving it, and that'll tell you. So I'll put a other 2 and put 1,000 in there and save that. And you see the other 2 has jumped up into the thing there. So we've got $43,000 worth of overheads. So we've done the 3 main costs being your enterprise or direct costs, your labour and your overheads. So if we now go to next, does that come up your end, Phoebe? Yeah, thanks, Luke.
Yep.
So this is an area of the MLA program where I struggle. What they do is, because you've got a wool and a meat operation, they actually calculate the lamb cost as a percentage of the gross income. So whether you can see that, I'll roll it up a bit more. Here they've got, I'll be in touch with MLA because I believe that this program calculation of 83% isn't actually right, but I'll show you why I think that. So we've got our income up here, which is this blue box up here, of 267,000. Our direct expenses of 85, overheads 42, labour 35, for a total cost for the sheep enterprise of 162. That one there. The calculator says 83% of the income is lamb income, and therefore the total cost of lamb production is 134 out of the 162 up there. Now, from our previous calculations, our 32,000 of dressed weight. Yeah, now I know what most people do for the first instance. They've got an idea of how many lambs they've sold, a rough idea of their live weight and their dressing percentage, and they will just come up with a figure that way rather than have the total account of all the sales like I had in that previous spreadsheet. So if you find that I've got this defaulted at 43% dressing percentage, so that's what gives us that. We've got a cost of production of $4.15. Our income was $6.48, which is, I think, a bit high, and our net margin of $2.67. So if we just can recall that, 415 is our cost of production, 684 as our total income per kilogram carcass weight, and $2.67 margin. So remember those. Now, that's the calculator if anybody's never used it before. It's relatively simple in terms of the calculator, but I'm still concerned about that 83% of the costs being attributed to the lamb, and I'll show you in a minute why. So now, Phoebe, would you bring up the Marble Flats Ken's method of allocating costs?
Yep.
You can do that. I'll get rid of this.
Is it this one?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're doing well. Good. Okay, so when we look at overheads, see, in the calculator, it's got 83% of the total costs are going to lamb. But when we look at the total farm, you can see how I've allocated those costs. And the method of allocating is estimated use or recorded use. There can be actual use. There can be a per hectare cost. There can be an actual split that you think, like you can see the insurances and things like that, how I've allocated them. And I tend to think what we should do is put these splits on them at the start of the year based on our budgeted income for each of the lamb and the wool. If we wait until the end of the year and the lamb does really well and the wool does very poorly, well, the lamb just automatically has to pick up more of the overheads. And I'm not totally comfortable with that. But let's go now, because, you know, like when we drench a sheep, what are we drenching it for? Are we drenching it for its prime lamb production or its wool? We're probably doing it for both. But should we actually allocate 50-50, or should it be the other way around? Oh, in a different way, sorry. Yeah, so just something to think about there. Okay, we've gone an hour, God. Now let's go to the Western Plains, volcanic plains best COP summary. If you could, Phoebe. I think I'll nominate you for an Order of Australia.
This one?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So when I did it with this sheep group the other day, I think this actually shows that, who am I to say, but I think the data on a couple of these are a little bit rubbery. So therein lies some of the issues behind benchmarking. We've got to make sure, firstly, benchmarking is about you comparing yourself to yourself from one year to another and looking for trend lines or things that are starting to get a little bit high. Then if we are confident that each person in a group has used the same methodology to actually calculate it, that's another thing. But the actual accuracy of recording the physical data, I think, leaves a little bit to be desired. But, you know, I think there's 4 of those are reasonably accurate, but you can see how there can be a huge difference within a breed or within a benchmarking group. And I don't think I would rather see the figure create a discussion rather than get too bogged down on what the actual figure was, in terms of, like, all you can do is control your own data, and you've got to make sure that, and generally speaking, within a group, over a period of time, you start to work out who's doing it right and who's not. And you sort of say, well, I'm not going to take those 2 people into consideration in any of my thoughts going forward. So you can see of 3 and 4 years ago when lamb was $8 and $9. So if you put $8 and $9 up there, what it does, transfers those dollars fundamentally, extra dollars are fundamentally transferred to the margin at the end of the game, end of the table. So we want to have the best possible margin. So you realise that the net margin per kilogram, that still has to pay your debt servicing, you know, your capital expenditure, your tax, kids' education, you name it. So we've got to be, you can't take this sort of stuff lightly. All right, now I want you to go.
Ken, what's a reasonable labour cost per kilogram carcass weight?
I reckon about $1, a bit over $1. I reckon the ones that have got it low there haven't really perhaps been truthful to themselves, but you know, they've probably polarised when they put their labour figure in. Even though I've encouraged them to put in an imputed figure rather than just their drawings, but I still think that they've gone back closer to their drawings. So labour, I think, if you look at $100,000 of labour, if that was we've got $34,000 worth of labour on this for 32,000 kilograms of carcass weight, so that's about $1.
Yep.
So in that order.
Yep.
Okay, let's go now to the volcanic plains benchmark and KPIs. That's a separate spreadsheet, Phoebe. Yeah, well done.
This one?
Okay, because of time, we won't get into this, but when we're looking at improving our cost of production, we've got to, I'm known in the industry for a saying, which is the biggest gain that most people can make is stopping what's slipping through your fingers. Well, I had a Best World group at Camperdown for 10 years. When I finished up with them, they actually gave me, I don't know whether you, my camera's not showing it, but they actually gave me a cooking mitten that has no fingers, so the bloody nothing could slip through. But we're looking here for our breeding ewe efficiency. If we're running, work this example, 5 ewes to hectare, scan 165, so we're into a good crossy or maybe into a composite on an 85% survival for 140 weaning. So we've got 1.4 lambs per ewe or 7 lambs per hectare. So when we're looking for cost of production, we could be saying, well, for a composite, we want to get that 85 closer to 90. And in the end, it might be when we can gain 2 or 3% there. Then we're looking for our lamb growth efficiency whilst on the ewe. If it had a 5 kilogram birth weight and it grew at 350, at 100 days, will have grown 35 plus the 5 birth weight for a weaning weight of 40 kilos. Again, there might be an opportunity there as to what do you really got to do to try and get another 20 or 30 grams per hectare. Obviously, we could keep the lambs on the ewes longer, but that isn't really all that advisable, I wouldn't have thought. But in post-weaning, we've got a 40 kilogram lamb at weaning. If it goes to 400 grams a day on pasture for 30 days, and we get another 12 kilograms to get a sale weight of 52. Roll it up, Phoebe, if you would, please. Then our per hectare summary, we've got 1.4 lambs per ewe or 7 lambs per hectare. We've got 52 kilogram live weight, 44% dressing for 23 carcass weight. That gives us 161 kilograms of carcass weight per hectare. If it was at an average of $7, then we've got $1,127 of lamb income per hectare, and that doesn't include the wool income from the breeding ewes as it is. So if your dressing percentage was 42, you'd be asking yourself question, why? What do I need to do to get to 44? So it's these little 2% there, that 3% there or 1% there that can roll into something quite meaningful. Okay, well, I reckon that was as far as I wanted to go. Whether I've answered some questions, I've probably opened up a can of worms. But is there any questions you want to ask?
Yeah, we'll open the floor. Does anyone have any questions?
Your biggest challenge as you go, one of your biggest challenges, sorry, Luke, is just how do you beat inflation? So in this case, we had $120,000 worth, probably $150,000 worth of costs. If we have inflation at 3%, we've got another 12 grand that we've got to try and increase our production just to maintain the margin from last year. Right, Luke?
Yeah. So if we can just go back, you mentioned before about getting a copy of that cost of production. Is that something we can do? That'd be fantastic if we could do that.
I agree.
You get download that from the MLA website. Just type in MLA cost of production and just go to the sheet one. And all the other spreadsheets you've seen tonight, you'll be able to access them on the Next Gen site. Phoebe will tell you now how you can get hold of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to access that gross margin. Sorry.
Yep. Yeah, that's there. All those things are all there. If you're struggling to find them, make sure you have a look at the tabs down the bottom of the worksheets. And
you mentioned there before, Ken, about like $700,000 to $800,000 per family unit, and it's interesting because you look at and that sort of income. I've sort of had a look at those sort of things and production levels for my own family versus my father's business unit. And when you've got debt and you've got debt and debt repayments to make, I think you need to be pushing up towards that $750,000 to $1 million per family unit. You know, if you need to draw a market value wage and make debt reductions, etc.
True.
Yeah, I'd agree, but there'd be a lot of incomes probably sitting around 5 to 600, and the way they're surviving is that they mightn't have much debt and they live very lean.
Yep.
They've probably got old machinery. It gets back to that cash, profit, and then wealth. You know, if you want to have some wealth when you come to retirement and being able to separate yourself from the next generation in your succession plan, then you need to have a return on your capital. Like, you know, we look at the two aspects. You've got your return on capital and your capital growth on your land. I've seen a lot of bloody poor farmers end up bloody rich because the capital growth that they've been able to enjoy on their farm. But in reality, if you want to develop off-farm assets and have some wealth, which will then allow the younger generation to perhaps continue to farm, well, we've got to try and it's very difficult now to get, you know, with land prices increasing, that just sort of drives the return on assets down because, you know, land price, you think, when the prices went up for commodities, you think, oh, geez, we're going to get a good return on our assets now, but it doesn't take long for the land to bloody respond and it goes up, and therefore your 1% and 2% return on capital becomes the norm again.
I think that has been modified in the last year, but I take your point.
Yeah. And that's why I reckon it's dangerous to be chasing the peaks and that in your land valuations and your livestock valuations. I think you've got to rationalise that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a nosy bugger, Jane. Do you use all those pots?
Can you see them? I've moved around. I use quite a lot of them. Yeah. No, I do use most of them.
Good on you. That's the way.
I didn't realise I've moved around from the fire. Yeah, it's cold out here, so anyway.
Okay. Any more questions?
Yeah, more questions?
I've got another one, Ken. I'll keep peppering you with
Yeah.
questions. So your interest cost, if we're looking to have a maintainable interest cost as a percentage of your margin and things like that, like turnover, what I suppose when you've got a breeding operation, you're buying land, and you're trying to increase your scale, then interest rates rise and land prices come down, and you all of a sudden your interest cost is a massive proportion of your sales if you're selling, or your gross product. So, for example, with us last year, we didn't sell any of our lambs. We held them all forward until the last month and sold them as exports. And I mean, for once, my father was right in that we held them and we got more than what we would have got if we sold them as suckers. Which is my argument. But it's where do you want your interest cost to be as a percentage of your gross product to be a sustainable business?
I've seen businesses that have spent 25+% of their gross income on interest payments, but a general thought is 15% of the gross. So in $1 million, you don't want to be spending any more than $150,000. So as you go down the scale, if you had $1 million worth of income and you were spending $350,000 on operating or enterprise costs, you're probably spending about another 180 on overheads. You're spending another 100 or thereabouts on labour, and 150 on your interest. You've probably got about $200,000 left to do all the other stuff. Do your capex and pay tax and as it go.
Yeah, right.
So the percentage of interest is probably proportionate to your ability as an operator to generate gross income.
Yeah.
So the more income if you are more economic in terms of converting your operating costs are really your absolute driver. I get frowned at when I call a lot of my overheads, I call them parasite charges. They're sucking off the business, but they're actually not actually, they don't have a production function. A lot of them, you've got to be careful, if you say to your accountant that, there's no production, but if you've got the right accountant, they should be giving you business advice that actually means that your bottom line is better. So they're the people that you've really got to be putting the fine-tooth comb through, and never get too close to your banker or your accountant or that, because when it comes to the hard call, if you've got a bit of a gap between and you're not too close to them, you'll make that call. But if you become too chummy with them, you might not make the call that you need to make. So be careful of that. How we going, Luke? We got another one?
No, I can think of plenty, but I might have a rest and give someone else a go.
Okay. Is there any others?
Any more questions? I think if you go onto the hub and go to Shepherd's Share, we've already got all the documents from tonight there. So if you want to find all of those, you can get them there. Otherwise, if there's any more questions.
What I might say to you is that you download the MLA calculator and you put it. Oh, there's one thing I didn't show. I've got to show you that definitely before we go. What is it? Which one? No, I'll let it go. We've been late. What I'd suggest is you've got all the data in those spreadsheets and the gross margins. It's just if you haven't got your data in a form that you can throw into the calculator, use that and develop it up, and hopefully that'll speed the process up, and you'll get a feel for what you need to do in your own situation after it. So the other thing you can do is, we didn't do it because we can hardly see it, but with the calc, you do a lot of what ifs. So in this area, most people would have fed out at least 3 times their normal amount of feed because of the season. So you can just up your fodder, and you can see what impact that actually has on your cost of production. And you do that with all your inputs. So, and most importantly, it's the decisions you make in good years that allows you to get through poor years. So if you're having a good year, plan for the bad one, because, we've had a lot of people who haven't planned for a bad year. Everybody knew it was coming, but they didn't plan properly for it. So, if we're having a good year, you're actually in a position of strength to be able to, whether it's putting money into FMDs or storing more grain or whatever, you're actually in a position. But when you get into a poor year, you can make the best decision in the world and it won't make any difference. So it's one thing I encourage. Thanks for your linking up tonight. And again, I apologise for the cop tool, but I think we bumbled our way through that satisfactorily to the end. So thanks for your support, and thanks for your work, Phoebe. It was bloody great.
No worries. Do we have everyone's got their questions out?
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your time, Ken.
Not a problem.
Yeah,
my pleasure.
Greatly appreciated. And I think, lots to continue to think about, and you've brought, lots of your knowledge. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah. Thanks, Phoebe. See you all. Bye.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up now. Thanks, everyone, for attending too.